Cue motivational music. Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name's Dean and I'm a designer on a quest. A quest to further understand the creative industry and learn as much as this noggin will hold. Join me as I share my discoveries and tap into the minds of some of the most well-respected creatives in the world. This is my creative therapy. Welcome to episode 17. Today I'm joined by the super talented user experience designer Jonah McLachlan. And in this episode, Jonah and I talk about some of the best and worst examples of UX design, the psychology of social proof and how it works. We also talk about the pros and cons of focus group sessions and loads more. To put things into context, I met Jonah at a user experience training course which he was actually teaching at, and it was awesome. I wasn't massively clued up on UX and I was a bit of a noob to the subject, to be honest, but I learned loads, and it wasn't just the subjects that you were covering that made the course so interesting, but it was the way you kind of delivered the presentations and the exercises. I've sat through some pretty boring courses, and that was definitely not one, which is awesome. When did you realize that UX is something that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, Dean. So thanks for having me. And this is kind of a weird parent-teacher thing going on here, or not parent, but like teacher-pupil or whatever. But
No, that's cool, man.
Yeah, I think I really got a passion for UX, and the topic was when I was doing my internship at the University of Edinburgh. And at the time, there just was a really poor services that a lot of the students were just complaining about. Nothing was really being done. And so specifically for my team and the sort of service we were managing, I was just really passionate about actually talking to some of these students and trying to see what I could do to improve it. From there just started. I spoke to over 2,000 students and teachers, and it just turned my perspective from just doing code and making websites to thinking, okay, what about the experience? And so that kind of really kickstarted my entire career to change, my university degree to change. And so, I guess I'm an evangelist.
So it was coding that you got into first?
Yeah, like my degree was software engineering, so
right, okay.
I was really getting into depths, of this like programming languages and UML databases. Like it was hardcore. Yeah.
Yeah, mate. I mean, I've tried dabbling in a bit of code in the past, and it is just it just doesn't bode well for me, to be honest. I think it's like a different skill in itself, there's a lot of talk around sort of designers should learn code. They should definitely learn code and stuff. But at the same time, I kind of see it as two separate sort of unique skills. I mean, it's great if you can combine the two together, and you're really good at those two things. But yeah, I used to work with a friend who used to code, and I just used to sit and watch him just literally just type in, and he was sort of envisioning what it is that he was creating without actually looking at anything visual, and it was weird, but yeah, I had so much respect for him. So was that element of always wanted to create like a better experience for something? Like, is that something that you grew up wanting to do?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I guess when I think about my obsession with technology, it started when I was probably just around 12, and I just loved exploring all the weird settings of Windows XP from my dad's computer. And I guess from there, my cousin actually recommended that I get into C#. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. I can actually write code and create little apps that do things. And my favorite bit, actually, if I think back, was actually around the UI, dragging a button, changing the colors. And from there, I guess that was really when, and this sounds really cheesy, but like I really fell in love with the interface. And then in C# in Visual Studio, if you double click a button, you can then add your code to it. So it's like, okay,
Okay.
So when the button is clicked, it does something. And so I just literally just did that so many times. It like pop-up messages saying hello, all those sort of things I just really, really enjoyed mucking about with. So yeah, I think for me, just really passionate about not just, I guess it's about bridging the gap between servers and computers and APIs.
Yeah.
And I guess I see myself as fitting on that bridge to connect to the world of the humans. And their completely different experiences. And I guess I see my role, whether that's technical or whether that's just through doing research, just bridging the gap, so that it's not a foreign, like, have you ever seen old people or like your grandparents or even your parents working with technology? You can just see that bridge is just so rocky, people falling off the bridge and stuff. It's just like not a good experience for them. So yeah, I guess that's where I position myself.
That's awesome, no man. Have you ever tried experimenting with a Raspberry Pi?
Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
See, I just see that as just a little too nerdy for me. Like, and I'm sorry if I'm offending the listeners here, but
No.
It's just never interested me. The hardware side of things, really boring. Yes, you can program and things like that, and I'm sure I could give it a good go, but I don't get satisfaction from connecting in sensors or like, I don't know, like it just doesn't turn me on in a weird way.
No, that's true, man. I mean, yeah, when I was looking at sort of all this code and stuff, I came across the Raspberry Pi, and I was wondering how far you could push it, and it just kept reminding me of the. Did you ever watch Wallace and Gromit? When everything was just synced up to whatever sort of computer, and he fell through the ceiling into his work trousers.
Yeah.
Then he walked in the kitchen, then the toast just flew across the room onto his plate, and
Porridge.
then the jam.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. I love it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So but yeah, mate, I mean, I've got a bunch of questions, and I'm keen to get your sort of opinion on them and see what you sort of think. A subject that comes up quite often is whether or not you need a decent qualification to get into the design industry. Do you have any thoughts on whether this argument has any legs, or whether people can be as successful in the creative industry without such qualification?
Dean, it's a contentious point. I think when you start to break away from the traditional way of hiring, you end up with this sort of question of, is it experience or is it education that we prioritize? And I had a friend who had the similar conversation with me, and he just says, who do you want to build your house? Do you want someone who can actually like lay bricks and has got 10 years experience of that? Or do you want someone who's got like 10 years of experience of reading about how to lay bricks, but has never done it in his life? And this was an interesting point around like where I decided in my own career to think, okay, I need to stop doing academia because I'm learning 3 times the amount when I'm actually at the desk working. So I think because we're such a practical discipline, in a sense it is like bricklaying, where if you have an eye for design or you have an eye for being creative, I don't think you can teach that in a classroom, really. But in terms of specializing, I guess, so whether you're going down the research route or the more, I guess, design theory or architecture, there are sort of specialities that you can do. So psychology you can specialize in, or things like that. But if it's just creating websites, if it's just creating like designs or like logos and things like that, it's just through trial and error, in my opinion. It gets different when you're hiring, maybe, but
no, totally, man. I completely agree. I used to work with a guy at the last place I worked at, and he was 16 years old, and he came into the firm, the only one without a qualification like a degree. And I remember people at the time thinking, he's on the same salary as us, and I think they had to somehow they couldn't employ him full time legally. They had to bring him in as an apprentice or something, just to make things legal. I can't remember how the whole thing worked, but his level of skill was through the roof. I used to look at his work and just think, oh my god, like this guy is, 10 years younger than I am, and he's knocking out work for some of the biggest brands in the world. And yeah, he was loving it, absolutely loving it. So there is definitely that argument there, and it's a real interesting one.
It's interesting, Dean. Like, I've seen some of the more trendy companies, the ones that have enviable office culture and things like that. I've seen quite a lot of them drop the requirements for degrees, but that's just not something that they even take into account. And I'm sure it helps, but I just can't really, unless it's done well, I can't see the link sometimes between the theory and the practice. And I think people should be hiring on the merit that they're passionate, like the friend you're talking about. He was good, so hire him. It doesn't matter how many bits of paper he has.
Yeah.
I can't take this this kind of school of thought to any other part in the world. To law, you can't say that. You have to have, to medicine. You can't just say, oh, just experience and trial and error. You can't do that. But I think with the design world and definitely development, you just got to do it.
Yeah. If you were to take accounting into consideration, that's obviously a skill that requires lots of, learning and practicing of numbers, which could probably be done in a sort of a schooling environment, whereas as something as hands-on. And I think creativity is one of those things where you can't necessarily teach it. It doesn't come from a textbook. You might get a few tips and tricks on how to do certain things, but the overall, the enthusiasm and the sparks of ideas that you might have don't necessarily come from that classroom environment. But then again, at the same time, for me personally, I mean, I learned so much through uni, and I was saying this to someone else the other day, but I kind of not only did I learn more about the subject that I was in, but I learned a lot about myself as well on learning how to live independently and those sort of things. So I guess there are sort of pros and cons of both, but it's an interesting subject, and I love talking about it. But
I'm a weird one, Dean. I'm a weird one. Like, I worked full time throughout the last 2 years of my degree. Like, I was working as a web developer when I was doing my honors degree and stuff. So I really, and maybe it's just university, I don't know, or maybe just the way I'm wired and just weird that way. So it totally depends. I think, like, what was your degree title?
Oh, it was a bit of a mouthful. It was, the official title was graphic communication with typography. That was but I mean, it was graphic design. That's what it sort of come down to, with a little bit of typography on the side. Yeah.
And I think there's so much art to that, right? Whereas I did web design and development, so it was literally just building websites. And I was learning. I was working with these other students, and even the teacher themselves didn't have any commercial experience, and so I just thought, like, how can you really effectively teach this if you've not been in the real world and had deadlines? And I don't know, so I'm maybe just a bit more biased than that way, but it's a good conversation.
Yeah, mate, absolutely, and it's definitely one that I could just spend hours on.
Right.
Absolutely hours on. But so if we pull things back a little bit to sort of UX and what it involves and what it is. Can you give us an overview of what it is for people who aren't familiar?
Yeah, like, UX is one of those weird words that you hear quite a lot, maybe across LinkedIn and stuff like that. Especially talking to a designer like yourself, it gets confusing because it's like, is it just about the aesthetics? Is it just about how it looks and feels? And, is it there? And how come some companies don't get it? How come developers maybe don't appreciate it, or stakeholders don't appreciate it? So like, how do we, like, address this? And I have the UX training slides in my head, so I'll move away from them just because that might be fresh for you. But user experience is just that combination of what a user needs, the things that help them buy a product, the things that help them get up in the morning. What they need to complete the task in their day, all their goals, and it's the research practice behind that. So I guess that's where the boring research comes in. But then it's also understanding, I guess, if you're in the commercial world, understanding the business goals and then bringing that together. And I think that there is I guess, a summary of trying to create a product. So, for example, an e-commerce website, it's a website that, yes, is selling something, but it's selling something in a really effective way. And it's just that study, that dedication that you have to try and understand the user. And yeah, like there's an element then when it's the like if you were going to go really nerdy into this, it's just that whole experience before, after, and during using that website. You know, during queuing up in the post office. That's an experience that's happening there, and there are then things that you can do to then improve and make those needs met, and also the pain points that users might have, their frustrations. Dean, I don't know whether you fly much, but like the best thing in the world is when you can see at an airport it's saying 10-minute waiting time. You're just like, oh phew, I'm gonna miss my flight. That's not just put there because of like, I don't know, clever some design team decided that. I'm pretty sure that's because they understood that there are tourists and business people who want to get through security quickly and who want to like remove and make it calm. So it's just that study and understanding the user and giving them a better experience offline or online. Is that like
yeah, mate,
spot?
That's superb, absolutely superb. I find it so interesting, UX, because it's something that sort of it's obviously attached to sort of design in some way, but at the same time it's kind of it's everywhere at the same time. So right. Like when you first wake up in the morning, how your door opens, so if you pull or do you push, and how the handle communicates that. And when you turn the kettle on, and the feeling of turning the kettle on, and what that gives you, is it a horrible click? Is it a smooth click? Yeah. And then like the weight of the cup, just all these different things that are obviously taken into consideration maybe when they were being made, but the user doesn't actually understand that the feeling that they're getting from it, and. A really interesting example that I got from your training session was the whole example of car manufacturers really focusing on user experience. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, totally. It's crazy because when we think about like a car, right? The car just has power. So you can tell a cheap car from a luxury car just by the way it sounds on the road. And all of that, I guess, is where, if we're going to link this back to the digital world, that's like the developers. They build, create performance for the products, how it works. And so for like a car, it's got, engine size, miles per gallon, the economy, all that sort of stuff of like how the car performs and what it does. And I guess we just call it the functional elements there. And the thing I was trying to communicate in the slides for the UX training course is saying how often there's only two parts that we really think about when it comes to like design and things like that, and it's just the aesthetics and the function. So it's like how it works and how it looks. And so the aesthetics is then just how it looks on the street, how it looks on a showroom or on someone's driveway. You can see that the more posh cars, the more like luxury cars, they tend to be a lot cleaner because the aesthetics are so important for that driver to say, I have wealth, I am important, and here's my shiny car. I have a Skoda. It's not very clean because it's just a car, and I'm not driving it for the aesthetics. Right. So all the kind of the curves and the way the lighting bounces off it, and the type of paint and alloy wheels and all those sort of things are all part of the aesthetics. And the point of the course was saying that often when we design websites, we just focus on those two, making it work and just applying a bit of paint to it, making it look a bit pretty. And the thing that I was saying, that I guess the main point was like, you can't ignore the experience. And a good, consistent car has that sort of design integrity right the way through to actually when you're sat in the car and, popping the bonnet. And as you said about the kettle, how it feels to actually interact with that. And so yeah, like luxury cars, like a, I don't know, Mercedes or something like that, has the leather seats. It's got that nice luxury feel, and you just feel good driving the car. And often when we design apps, UX or the experience isn't prioritized. It's just an afterthought, or it's we've run out of budget, so we'll just hope that the users can, get through it okay. So yeah, that was the car story of just that, like the story that the car tells, the way that good cars are made. Yeah.
No, I love it because it just basically it's a decent example of how we take sort of UX for granted, I guess, because you get in and out of it every day. For drivers, you're changing gear, and the feeling you have when you change gear gives you some sort of feeling back. And what I loved about it the most is that they actually mold the cars first before they go ahead and build them, just to see how, like you said, the light bounces off the curves and stuff like that before they go ahead and make it.
Yeah, so they use clay because that's the cheap way to build cars, is because with clay it's malleable, you can change it. Whereas imagine if they basically, and I'm not an auto manufacturer, I don't know this ins and out, but they instead of going to the factory production line and just shipping out all of these big cars, it's so expensive to have a product recall. But the way that they use clay to sort of create the car as realistic as possible, they use foil over the top. It's you've got to see the video. I'll maybe put that in the description or something, because the BMW process is just ore dropping. You're just like, wow. Yeah, it's awesome.
And another example as well that I got from one of your slides was, and it was only until recently that I realized that I think his name is Michael Burett. He's a partner at Pentagram, designer. He showed this on one of his talks as well. It was an example of bad UX and how bad things can really get from bad UX, and it was the example of the voting ballot in the US, which eventually got George Bush elected. And yeah, I just thought that was great. Can you run us through that?
Yeah, it's so incriminating, this one, because the way I tell the story, and part of the way I try and make UX training interesting is by making the drama, but sometimes the drama can be incriminating. But the simple thing around this is that when George Bush was kind of coming to power and stuff, I don't think that many Russians were involved in the hacking, and there was no Cambridge Analytica involved in that sort of voting. But from just reading the news stories and seeing what happened, basically the big election was happening for Bush and Al Gore to basically see who's going to become the president. And I think it literally came down, if you're a fan of the White House or House of Cards or something like that, you'll know the sort of the tenseness that they have before election night. And the whole world was watching, and I think it literally came down to one state within Florida, and it was a Democratic area, so Al Gore was primed to win. But just simply because of the alignment of the sort of the boxes that you tick, they kind of double sort of laid it out. So there's two columns of just delegates, right? And I think it was randomized. It wasn't. I think it was just kind of in sort of pecking order. But basically, what happened was that there was a overwhelmingly big majority of people who were going for Pat Buchanan, who was, I think, from the Reform Party, who wasn't very big in the area, but he had loads of votes just simply because of the way it was aligned. And I don't want to get into the political conversation, but basically, it could have been down to that form where people were, putting in their votes that could have changed the course of history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean,
one form,
I know, it's crazy. And to think, not long after George Bush was elected, the Iraq Wars started. So right. I'm not saying that the Iraq Wars were because of bad UX design, but maybe there is some sort of connection there. I don't know.
Yeah, because when we think about UX, most people think, commercial, and they just have the pound signs in their eyes. They're thinking money, money, money. But it has huge effects on health and social welfare. Good decisions. I don't know whether this is a side note, but currently I'm working with Belfast City Council, and part of that job is to actually understand the routes that the bin men take. around the city. So I like next Friday, I think I'm actually going on that truck with the guys and actually interviewing them and doing stuff like that.
Nice.
So UX of bins, that's my project, and it's not just like making money. It's not just about which country we're invading. It's just everyday things that we just don't think about. So like if you're elderly or maybe you have a visual impairment, putting your bin out might be a bit difficult, and we live in a society where hopefully everyone can be participating and getting their bin taken.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So
yeah, I've looked at things in a different light, to be honest, since you were doing the course. In that, I'm starting to look at things like completely differently now. Before, just like little things like picking the remote up and thinking, what button's at the top, what button should be at the top, and why is it there? Why is it that size? My thumb's not that small, and it's just weird stuff like that. But a really good piece of UX design that I seen a while back. It was doing the rounds on social. It was done by a guy. I think his name was Darren Senif, who designed a mock-up of a login feature for a website, and it was basically like he had this like character above the login section. It might have been like a Yeti or some sort of animal.
yeah, no, I've seen this, and is it the password thing?
Yeah. This is incredible. So, I mean, if you're familiar with it, could you tell us a little bit about it and what your thoughts are on it?
Yeah, like I think there's always the two areas of design that I see on the website, and I'm just going to caveat this. So there's the dribble world where there's a lot of really funky ideas, really awesome stuff that has never been in front of a human being to test with. And so often those are designed in isolation. But then there's other elements where you're like trying to really help people, and they've maybe done some research. And so for people who maybe aren't familiar, like you and me, like we're so familiar with logging in every day with our websites and stuff. And so I think for this particular website, they created like this, I get like avatar, is it maybe, or like a mascot for the site.
Mascot, that's the word.
Yeah, that's the word. Yes, and they basically got, as the user is typing, you had the sort of the eyes following the sort of the dots that they're typing in the password. It was awesome. And then like if there was like an error, it would just personalize the sort of feedback rather than it being like a you idiot, 404 computer can't cope with this. There was no kind of Dalek involved. It was just a really forgiving sort of friendly bear, and so in the circumstances it worked great.
Oh, it was, I loved it, absolutely loved it. So was it actually live then? Was it actually used on a live website?
I'm not sure. I have a feeling it was kind of just designed as like a, hey, check this one out.
Yeah,
which
that's
I think
the impression that I got.
Yeah. It's a shame, but I think there would be some, like, say the Bear Factory as an example.
Oh yeah, man.
Or Pudgy Bear. Anything that needs a warm, fluffy animal that's fun.
Totally.
Awesome.
I love the little tick box down the bottom. So when you were typing your password in, you get the option to show password for people who want to see their password as they're typing it in.
Yes.
When you go to click in the password box, he covers his eyes, the mascot. And then if you tick the box that says show password, he opens his hand, and so he's peeking through his hand to look at the password. I just thought it was great. I thought it was awesome. But yeah, that would be great if someone could take that idea and actually put it onto a live website. Yeah, like you say, it would have to be some sort of friendly, cuddly brand.
But it humanizes it, Like, I was saying about that bridge between humans and technology. Like, if you're not comfortable dealing with, SSL certificates and secure payment gateways and things like that, you need that sort of element of reassurance and trust and delight end of the day. So it's a good example.
I love that sort of stuff. And another sort of decent thing I wanted to talk about, because I think we talked about it a little bit when we met, and I would love to sort of talk a little bit more. User feedback sessions. So I've been to a user feedback session before where we created content and we sat behind a one-way mirror, and we could see the group react to our content, and we sort of went off that, and we went off what they were saying about it, and it was just like a user feedback session, I guess. But one thing that I did notice, so there was about 5 groups throughout the day, different age groups, but the thing that was consistent with each age group is there was always one person within the group who would speak louder, or he or she would make their voice more known than others. And everyone seemed to gravitate towards that person. It had almost influenced their decision and their feedback. And it was kind of frustrating because we were kind of like, well, I'm not sure whether the guys I was with at the time who were watching it with me were thinking the same, but I was kind of thinking, this is annoying, you know, you're influencing everyone here by being so loud, basically. There's got to be some sort of psychology behind that, right?
Yeah, Dean, like I've got a colleague whose background is in psychology, and like if you told him that scenario, he would like pull out his eyes and ears and just like, he would just curl up on the spot at hearing that. It's just a shame, you know, because like you're trying to get users to kind of give you feedback, and you're trying to make changes, you know, and I think what you've spotted there is exactly what happens, is that in a focus group setting, people tend to just talk, and if they know that they're getting a £20 Amazon voucher or something like that, they're just gonna talk, and they don't really care. And
exactly.
What people say and what people think and what people say that they do are just completely different. And I think from the UX training, I gave a few examples of just how people, you know, were offered, you know, like do you remember like the Sony sort of big sort of stereos, music stereos?
Oh, yes, briefly.
So basically they did like a big focus group setting with loads of different people, and they were saying, which color do you guys want? And they had kind of white, gray, and black. And everyone said gray. Everyone just unanimously just put their hands up and said, yeah, I'd really like gray. And so as a gift, as a kind of participant thing, they were just saying like, go on your way out, just go and pick up any of your choice. And they had like a table of all the different colors. And guess what color everyone picked? Black.
Right?
Black.
Oh, okay, right.
Right, and all the researchers were just like, how the heck did that happen? Because, you know, they all said they wanted gray, but the majority of them, and this is where the real thing comes behind like doing good user research, is not just by listening to what they say, because humans are crazy. Like they're so irrational, and they just kind of make, you know, mistakes, and they can't remember things. Like the best way to improve experiences for them is by observation and by understanding their behavior.
Yeah. So
like, see if you're like watching them use an application and you can see them getting stuck, that gives you so much more insight. When you can like give some of the experience and you can observe how they respond to that, that gives you a lot more insight than just having a chat about it. Because you're right, there are more dominant people in those conversations who are just going to sway it, and you know, more sort of passive people are just going to like, yeah, what he said. And from a research perspective, I know that like they would have really strict rules about the focus group settings, but let's avoid the bias.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, there's obviously a market out there, otherwise they wouldn't be doing so well. But yeah, I mean, again, not just with sort of design, but I can't remember where I've seen it. It might have been on a documentary I was watching. It was about coffee. Weird. I'm not sure why I'm watching a documentary about coffee. It was something about coffee, and they were saying that basically they give this audience two cups of coffee, and they asked them to taste which one was nicest.
Right.
And they all said the same one, and at the end they basically were told that it was exactly the same coffee. The only difference was the one that you chose had a weight at the bottom of the cup to make it heavier. And again, it comes down to like psychology and you know, what that sort of stuff influences like people's decisions and decision making. And I love the whole sort of. No, sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say exactly what you were gonna say. Like the human brain fascinates me. Like I was reading a book called Nudge, which is around the theory of getting someone to do something without grabbing their hand and saying, right, you're clicking here. How can you motivate someone to just change their behavior and things like that? So that's an awesome book.
That's awesome.
But just the ideas around how you can get people to recycle more, or how you can get people to, yeah, like just the way like placebos work, like similar with the same cup of coffee. Those sort of things just freak me out, you know.
Yeah, it's so weird. Again, it reminds me of another really decent UX example. You know the whole tomato sauce
Yes, yes.
example with the bottle. Can you run us through that? Because that's fascinating.
Yeah, so from the UX training, we talk about the ketchup. And if you don't know what ketchup is, or like tomato sauce, or whatever you want to call it, there was a really interesting study done by Heinz, sort of the European company that does mayonnaise, etc., and all that. They did this really interesting study. And like you were saying about the sort of in-person sort of focus groups, and how sometimes they can go wrong. Like imagine if Heinz did a focus group with parents and kids and things like that. And imagine if they said, how can we make the product better? They would have just got all these random requests in, like, oh, can you make the bottle camouflage, or can you make the bottles bigger? Can you reduce the sugar? And you just get random kind of non-helpful, very biased stuff, right? And it's hard to make clear decisions on that and be confident that it will sell more. And so instead of doing the focus group, they actually got their researchers back in the 80s to sit and watch parents and the children around a meal table. And from this behavior, they were actually make real awesome insights. So they observed two things just really quickly. They observed that the children were the consumers. They were the one eating the most ketchup. And I know, thinking back to my childhood, I love ketchup, and I think Dean, you are as well, maybe.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's what the researchers noticed first, and then they also noticed that the parents were the ones actually dispensing that. So they then just came up with their sort of theory, their hypothesis. What if we can make the consumer the same person as maybe the dispenser? What if the person consuming and eating ketchup could be this ones that could self-serve? Because if you think back to the 80s, they had the glass bottles, and they're very retro. They're good fun maybe in like Nando's or like a good English pub, but actually the squeezy bottles were what they came up with as a result of that research, because they thought, well, if we can make it more easier than a glass bottle that you have to like hit really hard and put your knife in to scrape it all out, if you can make it easier to dispense ketchup for children, what if? And that what if led to 12 times more sales in ketchup. And it's an awesome case study just to show the difference between like the focus group versus like actually observing how people behave. And yeah, that's what I love.
No, man, it's great. It's a great story, and it really puts emphasis on why UX is sort of so important. One thing that I wasn't a fan of that Heinz did was when they turned the ketchup green. Do you remember that?
I don't, but it sounds messed up. And do you know what that was? That was probably them chatting to some stupid parent who was like, "Oh, let's do green. Let's go eco-friendly or something," which is fine, valid point. But how many sales did that get compared to the green bottle, the squeezy bottle?
Exactly. Well, that's it, and it's just so. Oh God, I remember when it first came out, and my uncle give me some, and he was like, yeah, you'll love it, it's ketchup. And I ate it, and it was gross. It was exactly the same thing, but because it was green, it was minging. And it's funny how just the change of color has such a huge effect on the taste and stuff. But it's the same at the minute with the McDonald's plastic straws, or the cardboard straws, or whatever they're called. Have you seen all that stuff that's going about at the minute?
Well, I regularly frequent McDonald's, and I despise getting a milkshake because I basically suck cardboard for half an hour.
Oh, God. Well, that's what they're saying. They're saying it's milkshakes are the worst for these new cardboard straws because they just disintegrate because people are sucking so hard through them. And I tried having one a few weeks ago, having a milkshake through a cardboard straw, and it tasted different. which is weird because it's exactly the same. You're just using a different device to drink it from, but because it had this this fluffy, rugged sort of texture in your mouth. It just felt weird.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether they're going to go back to plastic or not.
It's so hard because you've got a corporate social responsibility as a company to be, making sales because you're being eco-friendly. I get that, and it's easy to recycle. But you're also adding loads of friction to your users, your customers, who lose trust. They lose loyalty, and I still want milkshakes, but notice the way I behave. I take the straw out, I take the lid out, and I just drink it like a big.
Oh, is that what you do?
Yeah, man. Like, how else do you just bring your own straw, or whatever? But
I think that's what you're going to need to do. I don't think they're going to go back to plastic straws anyway. I think I've seen an infographic earlier on LinkedIn about it. They can't go back. They're too deep in the sustainable world now to take a step back and use plastic again. But another thing you were talking about with the whole focus group for Heinz, I was speaking to a guy called Dave Burse who wrote a book called How to Get Creative Ideas, I think it was called, and he said he heard of a focus group that Pepperami were in, and they were basically saying they wanted to use the strap line, "It's a bit of an animal," and he was saying how crazy it was that they were even considering saying "it's a bit of an animal." And the weirdest thing was, as soon as he said it, I thought, you know what, it's just clicked. That strap line has just clicked. I get it. Before when I heard it, I thought, it's a bit of an animal. It fit the persona of the mascot from the advert. He was wild. He was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
But then when he said it's a bit of an animal, being a little bit older now, and it's a while since I've seen the original adverts, I was thinking, oh my god, I've just got it. It is a bit of an animal, and it just made me think, wow, that's it's crazy that they run with that, and it's a bit ballsy, and fair play to them. I'm sure there's a load of vegans out there sort of hitting the roof. Some vegans hitting the roof anyway. Yeah,
what I find really interesting about design is, as we've discussed, it's not just around making money or political elections, but it really does and change behavior. And one thing I'm trying to get into is thinking about the ethical, social responsibility that designers have. Yeah. And so, we're trying to give straws, but they're rubbish, and we're doing weird things around strap lines. Did you hear about the plastic bag things? Supermarkets and the 5p charge and stuff?
No. What's that?
Mate, so this is awesome. So I'm currently on the Sky News website, and they've just come back with... so the 7 big British supermarkets have reduced the number of sort of plastic bags that they use by 86%. Since they employed it in 2015.
Okay, I think I did see something on the news about this.
Yeah.
So they've reduced the amount of plastic by how much, sorry?
86%, I think. I'm so bad with stats. You read a headline and you're like, I'm an expert now. But I'm pretty sure basically because they've added in that 5p, they basically really brought down the sale of bags, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah,
and so
of course.
There's good and bad ways of kind of changing behavior.
Yeah. That's a great example.
Social proof is another one. Just a really quick example. I stayed in a hotel here. I think it was the Radisson, and I don't know what you're like when you stay in hotels and stuff, but when there's 5 towels stacked neatly, I'm using all of them. I'm here for 2 days. I'm just going to be throwing them on the floor. They'll get picked up later. I'm a horrible person, right? You relax, right? You have maybe 2 showers and then a bath, and then you want to dry your hair, and then you left one over there in the chair. So anyway, so the environmental and economic impact this has on hotels is huge. And how do you change behavior so that you recycle and you reuse a towel, or you just use one, you don't use 3 like I do? How do you change behavior? So they did loads of different tests, and I only came across this recently, but from them, they're trying to shift behavior. And so the way they did that was informing the customer of the hotel what other people are doing. And this is sort of a social impact kind of persuasion element here. And so there's a simple thing on the sort of the rail saying most of our hotel stayers, what's the phrase? I don't know. People staying in this hotel, most of them only use one towel, or they only reuse their towels. And with that one statement, it's so important, and it's that sort of social proof of just like making you think, well, I don't want to feel left out, and it's a really, really interesting way of kind of changing behavior.
That's crazy.
Just with that one little thing that just says, it doesn't say save the planet. It doesn't say like, you're such a bad person, stop making the cleaner do so much work. They actually just said, most people in this hotel only use one towel.
And did that prove effective?
100%. Yeah, I'll need to Google it here, but basically that had huge impacts. I think it was Radisson that did it.
That's crazy.
Just small things can just change behavior. You should definitely read the book Nudge, like 100%. That was on there. I even got like a presentation I can send you that I did recently on it.
Absolutely.
That's what makes me excited,
I did see something, I can't remember where it was, in a hotel last, and I seen something on the door, and it said, please try and be eco-friendly or whatever, and think about the towels before you use them or something. I remember seeing it, and I was just thinking about the way it was worded and stuff, and it didn't make me pay attention. I still do exactly what you do, and you take advantage of the fact that you don't have to clear up and stuff, which is quite bad, but it's what you pay for. But the whole idea of social proofing is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Have you heard what they've started to do in Canada at the minute with Instagram and Facebook?
No.
So they've started testing removing, I think it's just likes, or it might be engagement altogether, of people's posts in the main feed, which is and apparently it's doing well. Surprisingly well, like the testing. I'm not sure what exactly they're looking for, but they've rolled it out in a few more areas now. It might be in the US as well.
This is Facebook and Instagram.
It's definitely Instagram. I'm not sure about Facebook, but it's really interesting because if you look at the whole like influencer business model, which is pretty much based on the amount of likes that a post gets. It's interesting to see where that's going to go if this does go ahead, which is going to be really interesting. But again, it's interesting, that whole psychology behind it.
See, I would have thought that would be the completely different thing. Surely chasing likes. I'm just seeing this here. Ireland, Italy, Japan, Brazil, Australia, and New Zealand, I think, are ones that began hiding likes.
Ah, right. Okay. Wow. There's more than I thought.
Yeah.
That's
interesting.
Crazy.
You and me are both like on Google, like just Google as we do this webinar, this podcast here.
Yeah, mate. That's crazy though, isn't it? And I wonder. I remember Instagram went down around about 3 weeks. It might have been longer, about 4 weeks ago. Something happened. There was like a glitch in Instagram, and there was a load of influencers who lost a shit ton of followers.
Yes.
And they hit the roof. They went on Twitter and they were going, "Oh my God, I've lost 25% of my following on Instagram after it was down and stuff." And they were literally like, I think some of them were like massively upset.
Yeah.
And it was quite sad in a way.
Right.
And unless you've got like a business deal lined up with a brand where you're selling their product and that brand has asked you to promote their product because they know how much following you've got, then it's kind of slightly different, when you're thinking of it as work. But when you're just an influencer putting out a pretty picture of yourself and, you're crying at the fact that you're not getting as much engagement, it'll be interesting to see, how things play out maybe in the near future.
Yeah. And this comes back to the sort of social responsibility designers have, because yes, we've created platforms that are, supposed to bring communities together, but when you look around the depression statistics around social media, the self-harm, like I saw somewhere like 1 in 8 11-year-old girls around the UK self-harm.
Wow.
or something crazy. It's like really like shocking. You know, like depression statistics in Northern Ireland are so high. Like I kind of do this as part of my role, but like these stats stick in my head because I'm like, you know, yes, Facebook is doing well. They're making loads of money. You know, yes, you've got loads of likes, but you're almost creating like this. Oh, really weird. So just as I'm saying this, I did some research on this, just around the sort of negative effects social media has on you. And there was this research done around, for those who are heavy users of social media, those who crave likes, those who just can't live without it, and their whole social status just relies on their Facebook or whatever, they actually noticed that males produced this specific type of hormone. And I believe it's the same hormone that mothers develop when nurturing a child, a newborn child.
Whoa.
Yeah, like, and it was like a proper like research. I don't want to be like spreading fake news, but basically,
no.
it was just a really concerning thing that they noticed that these men, in particular, were so like literally like 9 hours a day connected, that their feed almost became like a child or something, and they developed this sort of caring sort of emotion there or something. It was a weird read. It's one of those reads that you share around the office and you're like, what the heck, and then you never read it again. How do we fix this? Like what's the solution to making people more connected, engaged, making them think more? You know, like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs wouldn't let their kids near technology, even though they're creating this monster. Like do we move to the mountains and get tinfoil hats on? Like, how do we?
I think you embrace it. I think we really embrace it. I think a lot of people have, obviously scared of where it might end up, but at the same time, it's kind of like it's evolution. If cavemen start a fire and they were like, oh shit, no, put it out, and never, it's not like they would never light a fire again. They stumbled across something that was going to change the world forever. And I think social media is kind of similar. I don't think it's going anywhere. I was speaking to a friend at work today, and we were saying, imagine if later down the line there becomes a social media channel where it knows so much about you, and it's gathered so much information and what you like and your interests and what you usually take photos of, and it just does it for you, and it just runs in the background of your life. You don't use it, you don't go on it. It will like your friend's posts. Your friend would like your posts. Yeah. Have you ever seen that episode of Black Mirror?
I've only seen a few. They freak me out, but I can imagine it's good.
Yeah,
is it the one where they have the cameras and all the community have cameras, and there's this guy chasing this girl around with an axe? Was it that one?
I'm not sure, mate. It sounds like every episode of Black Mirror, though. It's kind of it's all pretty much the same. It's just weird, techie, futuristic. But there was this one based around social media where they were basing life in the future. And long story short, you couldn't get, for instance, a mortgage unless you had X amount of stars, which today would represent X amount of likes. Yeah, there was this clip of a woman going into a bank and saying, "Oh, I need to borrow some money or a mortgage or something like that. I want a mortgage." And they were saying, "Oh, we can see from your social presence that you've only got 2.5 stars." So she goes outside and tries to be really nice to a taxi driver or something like that, because it's like Uber, sort of the Uber system when you can rate them, they can rate you. Yeah, I find it really interesting. But to answer your question, I have no idea how to fix it. Well, no idea.
You said about that Black Mirror episode around the whole element where there's that sort of system that measures and gives performance. They already have that in China.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. So they have like this sort of social credit system. Like, and it's just incredibly weird. So they already have that sort of element there around sort of judging products that people buy, so it's very convenient. So you can walk into a shop and it already auto suggests like things for you. So that's where technology is awesome. So like you go into KFC and it recognizes your order from facial recognition. Yeah, so like I'm reading off a BBC News article here that was written back in 2015, which is crazy.
Wow.
We booked a hotel last night using Sesame credit, and we didn't need to leave a cash deposit. So,
Right.
this is just a lady telling her story around how she kind of were able to just kind of pay on this currency that is based around how good you are as a citizen. But like, yes, it will have impacts on like if you cross the street, for example, they like have those cameras and that they will shame you publicly and put your face on all the billboards and stuff. Did you know this?
No, what the hell?
Like it's weird. Like we have a special dedicated channel in our company's Slack instant messaging platform, where anything weird we find about China, we just post it in there, and we just like have a moment's silence almost, like just to think, oh man, this is, and like technology is so good, but I just fear that we're, like just going, like I personally like have downgraded my phone. I don't know whether I showed you my phone when I was doing the training in Exeter.
I think you did, yeah.
Right.
I think you made a point of it as well.
So like in terms of like distractions, the time that I spend with my wife, I don't want my phone going off to say Facebook saying like, Jonah, there's an event near you that's happening and a few of your friends are going. I don't want that notification. Update your latest location settings. Like that's not a notification. That's them trying to steal my data. And so like I've downgraded to this brick phone. Like it can't even have. It doesn't have the internet. Doesn't have Bluetooth. It literally calls and texts.
Mate, that's what you need. Oh my god, I sound old.
No, like
I sound so old.
I'm 24 years old, right? I am young, and I just been trying to be more serious about like enjoying life and not being hooked to technology. But I just when I was kind of a teenager and stuff, I really, really like had like a bad stint with kind of the internet world and making friends online and trying to just lonely, I think, as a teenager. And I didn't find it. I just didn't find connection with people that lasted over a long relationship.
It's super weird, man. I know what you mean. I mean, I would love to delete Instagram and Facebook and all sorts, but I'm kind of running this podcast. I'm promoting it through it, so it's a bit annoying. But I know what you mean, and it's quite sneaky as well of Facebook, because I don't know how it's happened. I've changed my settings and notifications so many times. But I get notifications that pop up on the home screen when it's someone's birthday, when someone's posted something who hasn't posted in a while, when, someone's liked someone else's post. And it's a bit cringe and a bit beggy that, Facebook obviously wanted you to spend as much time on the channel as possible. I don't know, man. It seems to like got to the point now where it's so money driven, it's sort of it's devaluing the platform, I think. If you think of like where it was years ago, and what it was used for and stuff, and then as soon as like advertising got involved, that's why I'm really enjoying LinkedIn at the minute, using LinkedIn.
Same.
Yeah, because it's like it just feels pure at the minute. There's no real do you know what I mean? I do like it. It's all professional pretty much, apart from, and there's a whole Twitter page dedicated called The State of LinkedIn, which attacks the whole sort of idea of the hustle sort of culture around like, work really hard and be an entrepreneur and things like that. There's just loads of these articles of like people posting a photo of like a really like fancy car, and then they, it's not down to me, it's down to the hard work that I can have such a nice car as this. And it's just like pure brag post, and it's just not the place for LinkedIn. But there's just some absolute plonkers on there. But I'll show you the Twitter if you want. Well, so they're taking the mick out of people on LinkedIn. Is that the idea of it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm with it.
You just boasting about your achievements, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean,
funny.
LinkedIn has changed over the last 12 months. It is becoming a bit more sort of personal. People are starting to put, you might get the occasional photo of them and their dog. at the very most, you know. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think people just think it might be a bad thing because that's not what LinkedIn started as. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was kind of more of a business-minded, just post business stuff kind of thing. Whereas it feels a bit more social now and a bit more friendly.